Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here again. I spoke at this conference 11 years ago, so I'm here all the way from Toronto, Canada. A pleasure to be here in your beautiful city, even though actually most of you don't live here. It's still a beautiful city. This talk is packed, so I've prepared a written guide for you. It's a PDF, you can download it, no strings attached. Just go to this URL or use the QR code. And while you're there, at the end of this talk, I'll draw or raffle for 3 digital copies of any of my books. I've written 3, Human Side of Agile, Agile Mindset, and Agile for Non-Software Teams, and one that is just getting published now. You're the first people in the world to potentially have access to it. So you could get that in digital. All right. If you look at the way your company designs, develops, and delivers software, or if you're a coach, like you think about your client, do you see a lot of things to improve or fix? Show of hands? Okay. So the question is, what will improve things? Okay? What will improve things? What happened here? I have no idea. Okay. It doesn't work. Okay. What will deliver better results? Here are some options that I hear a lot. Product people, they want to run experiments. Engineers, they want to do continuous delivery. We have delivery leads and project managers who want you to estimate better or plan better. And we have executives who say, what's with all these recurring meetings? You're so unproductive, wasting time there. Sound familiar? Can I see a show of hands from anybody where your company has tried one of these in an attempt to make things better? Show of hands? Keep them up. If this turned out to be a totally happy end, all good, no side effects, one hand stayed up, a few stayed up. Okay. What can happen? Still doesn't work. What can happen? Some of these can have unintended outcomes, right? Unintended outcomes. For instance, you estimate better and you plan better. That will improve some things, but at the same time, you spend more time planning, and you are probably less adaptive, less agile. Or there can be an increased risk. You do continuous delivery, but what if your code is not safe? It's really hard to prove that it's safe to deploy. So continuous delivery is not the same as deployment, but still, you want to deploy the thing. And experiments, that's an example of something that often just dies. Why does it die? Because the organizations reward people for executing on backlogs, right, and delivering on features. And we know what we're doing. We don't reward people or not to incentivize, but otherwise tell them this is the behavior we want. The behavior of prove that a feature should not be dealt with, that we should not start something. The reason all of this happens is because value delivery, by which I mean delivering something of value, making a difference, not just the delivery, but making a difference, happens in a system. Everything is connected. We might sometimes use the term value stream, which kind of implies that things are sequential, there's a stream, but things are connected. You make a decision in development, it affects the next design, and so on and so forth. So if we want to deliver better results, we shouldn't just improve parts. Running experiments, that's improving a part. Introducing continuous delivery, that's improving a part. That's not necessarily always going to work, even though those ideas are not bad. So what we need to do is improve the system. So far, so good? All right. How do we do that? Here are some familiar ideas. Scrum. And then what? Scrum doesn't say much. So you take on Scrum, fine. But then what do? That one, who knows what that is? The big one. Of course you know. Okay. Yes, I got the updated version. That one tells you how it's going to be, but it may not actually fit your situation. Okay, so let's do something else. Let's copy-paste. Let's copy-paste Spotify, Amazon, something. Why does that not work? Well, it doesn't work because you can't copy-paste culture, which is what makes it all work. Okay, so forget that. Let's do servant leadership. Fine, we'll empower people and support our teams. But they still need to decide which way to take things. We still need direction. Should they go towards something that's more collaborative or something that's more individualistic? We need to decide somehow, something. Okay, here's another one. Value stream mapping, let's remove waste. Again, great idea, but not if your problem is that you're developing products that people don't want. If your products don't solve user problems, eliminating waste is not your problem. Just something else to do. So I want to show you a different approach. Not an Agile framework, not a new way to do Agile, a different way to think about making things better. I've been in Agile 23 years or so. I've worked with about 100 clients so far. I'm basing this on what I've seen, not just what I did, but what I've seen, what I've also seen with companies that approached me but ended up not hiring me. I still know how they work. Everything I know from the industry, from conferences like this. What can we do different? In this model, what I want us to improve is not to plug holes, but we want to improve our system's fitness for purpose. Anybody familiar with this term, fitness for purpose? A few of you, yeah, okay. So I use it here in a slightly different way than usual. But let's start first with that one. So I was saying that our work happens in a system. That's what I mean. It's a big thing. So it's a part of your organization. It's a whole bunch of people. It's the doers, it's the managers. It's how they get their work done, right? All in service of products and solutions that make a difference. Which means all the way from idea or concept to delivery. So I'm not talking just about development, or just an Agile team, or your product management, or your analysts. I'm talking about all of them together. And right there, we have a problem. We have a problem because as an industry, as an industry, we don't have a good name for this thing. What do we call this? I mean, think about it. You have other systems in your company. You have finance, you have HR, you have marketing. You know who they are. They know who they are. There's usually a single person at the top, for better or worse. What do we call this? So the name I've found to be, I don't know, in use by about 50% of people is product development. Other people don't use it because they don't think of their thing as a product. It's a solution delivery, or something like that. Maybe it's IT. They don't always think of it as product. So the term I've been using is just generic. It's a value delivery system. Now, before we continue, I would like you to get a mental image of the system that you work in. You don't need to say anything, just think about it. Who's in it? What does it include? And the easiest way I know to do this is think of your product or solution as a movie. What comes at the end of every movie? The credits. Who did what? Who decided what? Who supported what? That's all the people in your system. So if you're in a tech company, it's product and engineering and content and delivery and architects and whatnot. If you're in IT, it's not just IT, it's also your business partners. You probably have vendors, you probably have contractors. There's probably more people involved. So just get a picture of who that is. It will not correspond neatly to the org chart, because the org chart is very much like this. Now, fitness for purpose. This is a term that we're used to using in the context of products. Does this product, the microphone, do what I need it to do? Is it fit for its purpose? Well, it kind of does, because I can talk and wave my hands, but it's also uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. So it's fit for purpose, but kinda. I couldn't wear this for 3 hours. So the purpose of your value delivery system is to help the company do what it's supposed to do, achieve its mission, achieve its objectives, whatever the objectives happen to be. And it is fit for its purpose if it does that well. So that's what we want to improve. I've discovered something, that regardless of your operating model, regardless of whether you have projects or products, Agile or traditional, Scrum or Kanban, systems seem to go through the same 5 levels of fitness. And they go through them, when they improve, they go through them one by one. They don't jump. Let me show you what they are. So the first one, maybe I'll get my own clicker, because this one doesn't work. At level 1, people work hard. They work hard, they have some successes, but overall, the system can't really deliver on what the company needs it. What happens there, okay, sorry, we didn't have time to set up. What happens there is that nobody feels like they can succeed. There's always work coming in, and competing priorities, and escalations, and every day there's a crisis. You know this one? Yeah, maybe not your current place, maybe a previous place. At every level there's a risk. The big risk for level 1 is that the few people who hold it together, the few people who kind of step outside of the roles and kind of pitch in and whatever, that they're just going to give up and go someplace where they can succeed. A level 2 system, it contributes to achieving objectives. It's just not effective and efficient enough. By effective, I mean solving the right problems and addressing the right needs. And efficient, you know what it is, minimal waste. So it does things, it's pretty good, but not good enough. And what happens there is that there is some regularity, but there's always tension. The risk is that there's always more interference because more people want stuff done, and at some point this thing breaks down. This is typical of struggling agile implementations that are mostly process. When a system is at level 3, the results are satisfactory. Nobody's mad, usually. Things seem to be okay. But what happens then is that you look inside and you realize that there's a few people there. They're not a team, but they make all the calls. It can be a product lead, a business lead, an architect, a director. A few people, they make all the calls. They've optimized things to their style. If they leave, that's going to be trouble. But anyway, because the thing is optimized, if there are like big changes, like a project really needs to pivot seriously, things start breaking down. Level 4, that's a good place to work. People love it. There's no problem hiring. Everything is good, except when it comes to like really big work. So examples from companies that I'm aware of is a company that bought another one and needed to integrate it. And that took them forever. And your stakeholders, the executives, they lose patience. So now everybody's starting to subvert the process. Another thing that you might do is create new customer journeys. So you've built something, it works just fine, but now you're creating more customer journeys, more verticals, more industries, and it just takes forever. So there's a loss of trust. Level 5, it does everything we need it to do. Now, it sounds like nirvana, but they do exist. I've seen a few, I've worked with a few. Their big risk is a change at the top. A new executive comes in. I'm not going to name which company they come from, but there's a certain one where executives seem to come from and say, we are not going to do things like this around here anymore. And they totally change this and it goes down. Okay, so how can we determine the fitness level of the system that you're in? You could theoretically just look at this list and say, yeah, we kind of like 3, or we're 2. But I want to show you a different way to think about it. A way that unpacks fitness. Like, what is it made up of? So what does it mean to be fit for purpose, right? It means that we help the company achieve its mission and objectives. So it's not about how well we do Scrum, or how well we follow Kanban principles, or how good our culture is. It's about the effects of how we work. So I've done a lot of research into this to identify which aspects matter. Like I can observe a whole lot of things, I can measure a whole lot of things, but which ones matter when it comes to the fitness of how we work? And there's 6 of them. They're not dimensions, they're not independent. So there's 4 basic ones. Throughput is how much working product we deliver in short spans of time. I don't care if you use sprints or not, short spans of time. Outcomes is how much difference does that work make? Solving problems, achieving goals, and whatnot. Timeliness, we're supposed to be delivering useful stuff. By the time we actually deliver, is it still useful? So that's timeliness. I don't care if you use deadlines by the time you deliver. And the fourth one is adaptability. How adaptable is the system to needed change, to work differently or to change the product? And then we go meta. How consistent is the system about it? Because maybe this month or the next month you have good results, but the month after that, it's a mess. There's just no consistency. You can't plan this way, you can't manage this way. So if you have low consistency, the system is not that fit. And the last one is, are we efficient with our money for getting these effects? We're spending money. We're paying our staff, we're paying vendors, we're paying for cloud, we're paying for automation and tooling and whatnot. Are we using our money well for the effects we're getting? So I've come up with a really simple assessment. It takes 10 minutes, which I don't have today, but if you downloaded the written guide, there are instructions there. You can do this with your colleagues back at work. Seriously, takes 10 minutes, and it starts some really good conversations. I'll show you the URL again in a moment. And it kind of looks like this. You look at each aspect and you say, well, what's the best we could do? What would be the practical, relevant optimum for us? Not what the industry standard says, as if there's even such a thing, but what would make most sense here? And then we look at how we do things right now, and we look at how far apart they are. Here's an example from a client. When I first met them, that was 2 years ago. Fast-growing startup, what we call a unicorn, because they were worth over $1 billion. They had 5 Scrum teams. The teams looked like they were doing okay, but the company just needed more. So things were not necessarily broken, but they were just not at the level that the company needed for its growth targets. They delivered on backlogs. The backlogs were prioritized by value. Okay, so again, from a Scrum standpoint, that was fine. But the product strategy was weak. So the work didn't matter as much. And there's a few more things here. I don't need to read all of this out to you, but look at this. This is not about how well they did Scrum. Who cares? It's about their overall way of working, process, structure, choice-making, and the effect it had. And the effect it had put it at level 2. Remember, level 2 means not effective and efficient enough. That's it. So if they want to improve, they need to go to a level 3 first, and then to level 4. And I'm going to show you how it's done. Because something else I discovered is this. Leaders always want to make things better. You are here because you want to make your work better, right? Not just learn, but to actually make things better. And again, the question is, well, how do we do that? What do we change? If you're starting, from scratch, you're putting together a team and there's a new project, okay, maybe that's easier. But you have whatever you have. How do you make things better? Where do you start looking? And I discovered something super interesting. Leaders don't have time. And when they understand that they have to upgrade the whole system, not just a team here or engineering there or a new definition of done here or little tiny, continuous improvement things, it looks big and scary, and nobody has time for it. But what I found in my research, again, it's not just what I did, not at all, it's what I've seen companies do that worked and what companies did that did not succeed. And I realized that there's only 10 things to do to get from troubled to awesome. And they're sequential. So for instance, if you're here, if you're at level 3, you need to do these 3 things. I'm going to show you what they are, of course. That's the second half of the talk. You need to do these 3 things. You don't need to worry about these. And so let's say you're at a 1, you do these 2. You only need to get to a certain threshold so they kind of stick. And then you're at level 2. And then you do 2 more and you're at level 3. So the idea is to give you a sequence of strategies, not prescriptions, not practices, not here's how you set up Scrum or Less or Safe or whatnot, but how to approach your work. Because chances are it's not going to fit the mold. And a lot of the points you made, Andrea, actually just parlayed straight into this. Now, to make this work, you have to work across the system. Again, that's a bunch of people. It's not just the org chart. So you have to have cross-system partnership. What normally happens is that people don't partner. You have like a director of engineering saying, okay, I'll fix my engineers. I'll upgrade things here and there. I'll set up some more infrastructure there. but they don't talk to product. They're afraid to talk to product, or something like that. Or product, they do design thinking, fine, or lean startup or whatever, but engineers, they just do as they're told. That's not going to work. So we need this foundation, both of some intentional culture, not accidental culture, which is what most places have, and cross-system partnership. So, like I was saying, there's a lot here. I'm going to describe how to build up great systems. If you'd like to get this, I'll step out of your way. And also, again, at the end, I'm going to draw for 3 copies of my books. So this will give you a lot more detail, including the assessment I mentioned. Okay. So let's say your system is at level 1. By the way, can I see a show of hands, just when I showed you the definitions, who thinks that they work in the level 1 system? It should be okay to admit, because it's not your fault. Okay. Remember, what happens at level 1 is that people just can't succeed. Usually it's because they have too much work to do. So the company prioritizes, but not really. Everything is a priority 1. Everything is an escalation and an interruption and whatnot. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get your project portfolio under control. So what's your project portfolio? It's your features, your epics, your initiatives, your tech debt repayment initiatives, your big maintenance activities, all the big work. Not the work you would put on a sprint plan. This strategy takes place upstream from your Agile teams. It's where the leaders in product and business and engineering and other managers and stakeholders, they work together on what we really absolutely have to build or experiment about, and not everything. Because when it's everything, it's the teams that suffer and they can't succeed. So we have lots of good ideas from Kanban about doing this. Visualize it, limit work in process, right? Include all the work, not just features, but also technical work, and so on. But the most important thing is that you have leaders who actually work with each other on making sure that the teams work on just the most important things and not everything. The other thing you do is you actually design your way of working. And this is the opposite of what 90% of the world is doing. 90% of the world goes the other way. They don't design their way of working, they take it off the shelf. The shelf being the frameworks that copy-paste this and that. And then they try to bend reality to fit it. What you need to do instead is you need to look at your system and say, what should we optimize it for? What will help us deliver the right product to the right customer at the right time? And if it happens to be the Agile ideas, awesome. It often is, but it doesn't have to be. I've had many clients where it was like a mix of things. So here's where you confront the question of, should we specialize or should we collaborate? Should we maximize flow or should we maximize busyness? Keep everybody busy. Load our resources, so to speak. This is where you look at these things. So it's not this talk, but I've given other talks, and in some of my earlier books, it's like, how do you do this? Basically, you look at what are the few most important things that we optimize for. Those are the values. You identify your beliefs, which is, what are we assuming here that gives them validity? And from this, you decide what your principles are, which is how you'll make choices. You'll simplify, you'll collaborate, you'll work in a sequence, or whatever it happens to be. And from this, you determine how you work. There's no magic there. It takes a few hours. If it ends up looking like Scrum, so be it. If it ends up looking like Safe, so be it, or like Less, or whatever. But chances are, if you do this for real, it will look a little bit different. Because it will be yours. It will be the right thing for you. Once you're at level 2, so what you've done so far is you've limited the team's load, and the teams are organized appropriately. They have some way of working that fits what they need to do. Now you need to plug holes in decision-making, even if you take some of the Agile frameworks, even if you take the PMI version of Waterfall, or whatever, chances are some decisions don't have a good home. Here's an example. Let's say you are in release planning. Who gets to decide on the date? You usually know the answer to that. Let's say you're midway through the release. Stuff happened. Who gets to move the date? In a lot of companies, they don't have a good answer for this. It might be product, it might be a director someplace, it might be a VP, who knows? So the process has gaps. And the other thing you need to do is you need to create stability. So think about it this way. Your system takes in a whole lot of demand, requirements, specs, charters, briefs, all stuff to do. And at the end of it, it delivers something. When you're at a level 2, things are out of whack. You can't have good expectations of when stuff might be delivered. You can't even have good expectations about the quality. You need to fix that. Kanban and Agile give us great ideas for this. So from Kanban, we can get visualization and WIP limits and policies. From Agile, we get breaking work down, and we get cross-functional teams, and we get getting to done, and a whole bunch of really good ideas. And the idea there is that when stuff comes in, you kind of understand by when you'll be able to ship it. This is not about creating predictability like in Waterfall. It's about understanding sort of your delivery capability and reducing variation. So things are sort of under control. So everything we've done so far just gets us out of trouble. Things are kind of stable. Every decision has a home. The teams are set up. We can sort of have some reliability here. You're at level 3. Remember what happens at level 3. At level 3, things are generally okay, but it's depending on a few people who make the key decisions. That's not good for us, because when a big change comes in, we're toast. This is where we started doing a lot of the agile goodness that we always talk about, and somehow it never seems to stick. Where we talk about safety for everyone, and teamwork everywhere, and collaboration everywhere, and somehow it just doesn't stick. And the reason in most places it doesn't stick is because it's done prematurely. This is a level 3 thing. In other words, first make your flow or projects, whatever it happens to be, just make them kind of regular. Now, people will feel that it's okay to open up. Now, people will feel that it's okay to engage. Now, it's possible for them to collaborate across teams. A lot of people are of the opinion that you need to start by creating safety before you ever get to any agility. I used to think this way. And then I saw that in many cases, it just doesn't work. It doesn't stick because people are too worried for themselves that the attempts at safety just don't work. And they're too concerned with just making ends meet, so to speak. Second thing we do, that's a lean idea, but it works also if you do projects. What happens in a lot of companies that are at level 3, or systems that are at level 3, is that there's too much planning and too much commitment. They commit to everything. They commit to objectives and to outcomes and to plans and who will do what and when and so on. And what happens then is that you're too constrained. You can't react to changes. So the idea here is to reduce what you commit to. Definitely commit to objectives. It's good to commit to outcomes, but stay away from committing to solutions. Instead, let them evolve more. When you do that, it becomes possible to increase release frequency. Now, that's another agile staple that somehow doesn't seem to work all that well because it's done prematurely. This idea that, if you work on yearly releases, you go to every 3 months. And if you do every 3 months, you go to 6 weeks. If you do 6 weeks, you go to every sprint. It's really hard to pull off. But if you do the first one and you defer your commitments, now it's possible. But if you try to go the other way, you try to release more frequently, but you still make big commitments, good luck. It's not going to matter. People will still execute on big backlogs. And the third one is to engage teams more meaningfully. You have teams sitting in on planning, but if your system is like a level 1 or 2, I'm going to guess, again, based on what I've seen, that the teams don't actually contribute much to planning. They just mostly sit there and maybe show a card that says 3. Okay? Or they break down a task or 2. They don't need a meeting for this. So the idea is to look at your planning opportunities, your solution discovery, your road mapping, your release planning, planning migrations, all of these things, and say, Who should we bring in? Which experts, which teams? And actually configure your meetings and how people contribute so you get more brains on the job. Again, this is basic Agile thinking, but if we try this prematurely, it just doesn't stick. We have lots of meetings, and people complain about meetings because they don't speak in meetings, because it's not safe and because the rest is not in place. I came upon this model after many years of trying to give companies so much of the Agile goodness and saying, well, you can do this, and things do hang together, but a lot of it didn't quite stick. If you sequence things, you have a better chance. At level 4, things are, again, generally good. Level 4 systems are generally good, but there are still things to improve. Now, we can give teams more autonomy. Again, an Agile staple. You need to be at level 4 for autonomy to be real. So, for instance, allow teams to decide if they need to create a task force or a guild or to change their process. So not everybody does the exact same thing, even if it doesn't fit them. So increase that autonomy. Get better at decision making. You make decisions all the time. Some of them don't turn out all that well. Some of them are okay. How do you make them better? Well, we say, well, you get data. But it's more about the decision-making process itself. So we want to upgrade how we make decisions. So it's not product decides this, and engineering decides that, and the next executive decides the other thing. Instead, we decide with system thinking, with outcome thinking, with humility, with collaboration. And that will give us fewer failed decisions. We can't eliminate failed decisions, but we can reduce them. And the third one has to do with the technical cost of change. So you need to change your product, new feature comes in, a change request, I don't know what it is. Change costs us. You might call this technical debt. Show of hands if in your company there is technical debt and nobody's doing anything about it? Yeah. Why is that? Because nobody can do the strategy at the lower levels. They're too busy with the present, whereas this one is future-looking. So this is where we talk about paying down tech debt and reducing legacy and so on. And when it comes to new work, there's all those lovely Agile technical practices that allow us to create code that is safe and cheap to change. Again, if you try this too soon, it's not going to stick. But now it does. And the reason it does is because at level 4, finally, the leaders of the parts, like again, leader of product or business or engineering, development, whatever, now there's finally some more partnership. Because we got out of the woods. We're okay, we have some good performance here. So, to wrap this up, you have a lot of people doing complex work. You know, so much of the Agile talk is about either teams or what leaders do. There is very little done in the context of the entire system of value delivery. There's a lot of people in it, the lines are not clear, the ownership, the leadership, they're not entirely clear, but we have to work there because dealing with the parts is not enough. What do companies do? Either they do huge transformations, like a flip the switch type of thing, or they do little continuous improvement all the time, and then it's what's known as death by 1,000 cuts. And it just takes too long and doesn't necessarily solve what you need to solve. So what I try to do here is to find the middle ground. Whatever your operating model, okay? You're at an Agile conference, so you call your way of working Agile. Most of the world doesn't. Most of the world, they have something. It's kind of copied from ideas from Scrum and ideas from DevOps, and they read the Accelerate book and whatever. They have a mishmash. It might pass for Agile, it might not. They don't care, but they still have a system of value delivery to improve. So these strategies, they apply in those situations too. The idea of sequencing and working incrementally. So what do you do? Again, remember you work with the whole system. The first thing you need to understand is, like, where is your system at right now? Okay? So I showed you an example. Again, if you download that, you'll get the instructions of how to do it. Seriously, you do it with your colleagues. It's a conversation they're not used to. because there's no process in that conversation. But because they are incremental, you need to see if the lower level strategies are in place. So if you're at the level 3 and you haven't quite done the manage the project portfolio from level 1 or fixing decision gaps from level 2, you need to fix them first. Otherwise, the changes won't stick. And again, you layer this up. And that's basically it. So we are going to do the book raffle now. And here's how I do this. So those of you who decided to join in, I need reading glasses. So to randomize, I go like this. I can't see a thing. Okay, maybe Patricia Mobolade? All right, come to me after. Here, another one. Manuela. Manuela? Okay. Okay, we'll do 2 more. Peter from Miro. All right, okay. And Ivan Volobuda? All right. So, thank you all.